Hey everyone, Rho here. Well, we have reached the end of our Vulkan focus for the week, and today I thought it'd be a fitting end to have a little updated conversation on what if Vulkan returned to the current Imperium. General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself, without spoilers. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. So we've spoken a little regarding a Vulkan return before, but in really thinking about it this past week, I felt it would be good to have a little more discussion about it. And talking of Vulkan return is a little different to the other possible loyalist Primarchs, in that we've already had a preview of sorts on just how he may feel about the Imperium, thanks to the Beast Arises series. Now, side note, the only reason we haven't dived into that in depth this week is because I haven't finished reading the entire series yet. As hopefully you'll know, I prefer to make sure I've fully read everything and made up my own opinions before we really analyse and discuss them. I'm a little old-fashioned and prefer an old-school book in my hands over a tablet, so it takes a little longer sometimes finding these older reads, but it's definitely some discussions for the future. However, regardless, Vulkan was actually found and returned to the Imperium when the Orc menace was really threatening the Imperium's existence. And Vulkan did not pull any punches in his appraisal of the High Lords of Terror. After evaluating their history over the course of a day and a night, he made his opinion perfectly clear, telling the High Lords of Terror to their faces that if the Imperium wasn't in such a dire situation, he'd kill them all himself. With that in mind, it's hard to argue the Imperium's in any better situation now. So, Vulkan is most likely still out there somewhere, on some forgotten backworld planet, defending the people of the Imperium against some limitless demonic horde. If he were found and convinced once more to return to the Imperium, I think it's safe to say his opinion for where the state of the Imperium institution is would be exactly the same. His opinion falls in line very much with his brother Guilliman. Both of them are disgusted at not only the corruption the Imperium has suffered, but also its fall from the Imperial truth. The rhetoric the ecclesiarchy has spread across the Imperium. And on the topic of Guilliman, I actually think Guilliman could be central to getting Vulkan to return if found. Firstly, knowing he once more has a brother out there, returned and actively working to save the Imperium at large, I feel that would certainly motivate Vulkan to help. And secondly, while I don't remember any particular interactions between the two in the lore, we can certainly infer a fond relationship between the two from the Unremembered Empire series, when Vulkan had crash-landed from orbit upon Macragge, escaping his brother Conrad's torture. The Ultramarines had found his ruined body and confined him, unsure at first who this even was. But as he began to heal from this apparent death, Guilliman was informed and brought to see his brother, and Guilliman became clearly distressed that he was essentially behind bars, demanding his legionaries let him in. "Let me in there, damn you. My dear brother is returned to me, twice, once from death that I thought had befallen him on the traitor's field, and once from the death that delivered him here. Let me in." So obviously it's pretty clear Guilliman was fond of Vulkan here, even slamming his fist in anger against the wall. However, unfortunately, as we know, Vulkan was suffering from insanity during this time, from the ravages of everything he had been through. So rather than a fond reunion, Vulkan fell to a mad rage when he laid eyes on Guilliman, slamming the walls of his cell with his fists. But again, we at least got another line confirming a brotherhood and friendship from Guilliman. "Brother, it is me. It is Rabute. Calm yourself." So with that in mind, we can safely assume, in my opinion, that Vulkan and Guilliman had a good and healthy kinship as Primarchs. Now, Vulkan did oppose Guilliman's Codex Astartes, which could throw a spanner in the works in the future. However, I don't think it will too much, as the lore tells us Guilliman relents to Vulkan's request, and the salamanders are not split into multiple chapters due to their small size. So, if Vulkan returned to the Imperium, he and Guilliman would be expected to have a good reunion. And when it comes to working together, as I've said previously in discussions regarding Primarch returns, I think generally Vulkan would cede to his brother's leadership and expertise on most matters. Vulkan was clearly there the first time Guilliman was appointed Lord Commander, so returning to find his brother once more in charge wouldn't be anything overly shocking to him, such as it may be to Lionel Johnson, for example. Vulkan, as all the Primarchs, does have a stubborn streak when he has made up his mind, and he may not be as coldly practical as Guilliman in all situations. However, Guilliman is one of the more human Primarchs in nature, despite his reserved exterior, so again, it's not a situation that would arise too often. Now, as for the Primaris, for me, again, while hard to pinpoint with Vulkan, my gut tells me that wouldn't be too much of an issue, and once meeting sons of his own lineage, I think Vulkan would be won over. As I've said before, I feel quite strongly that Vulkan would seek to get across the rift, to help the people abandoned within Imperium Nihilus. I think that's a given considering his nature. But there's two factors that could change that. The two things in particular that have had me thinking since our previous discussion and over the course of this week. And they are the expected revelation of Guilliman's history, namely the Imperium Secundus, and Vulkan's relationship with the now Chaos Primarchs. Let's begin with Imperium Secundus. Now, while things may change moving forward, it certainly feels as of the end of Godblight that Guilliman's history with the Imperium Secundus is going to be revealed. That the wider Imperium within the current timeline are going to learn Guilliman's secret history, at least in some manner. And considering that, you would expect it to become a big storyline, with the opposition to Guilliman within the Imperium certainly growing. So if Vulkan returned during this tense time, how would he feel? Would it alter his perception of Guilliman? This is a bit of a hard one to judge, but my gut tells me no. I can't remember any particular lines off the top of my head referring to it, so I may have to go back and have a read through some of those novels, but I think Vulkan will already be completely aware of the Imperium Secundus. And no, this is not because he was on Macragge during the heresy, because as we said he was suffering insanity, which he barely remembers any details of, but instead because he united with his sons when he awoke, who we know filled him in on the details of what has transpired. And we know this due to Vulkan and Magnus's reunion upon Terra, later during the Siege of Terra, when Magnus brings up the memory of the Shard who assisted Vulkan's sons in getting through the Ruinstorm with his body to Nocturne. Vulkan reveals he knows of it, replying it is thanks to Magnus's help they were able to bring him home. So if his legionaries filled Vulkan in on the details of their journey from Macragge, I find it extremely hard to believe they wouldn't mention why they were there in the first place. What was happening whilst they were there? There is no way they wouldn't mention to their Primarch that his brother Sanguinius had been appointed Emperor. Considering this, I feel it's an absolute certainty that Vulkan must know about it. So regardless of how Vulkan may feel about it, he at least already knows it. So there would be no shock on hearing the news 10,000 years later. Regardless of any grudge Vulkan may have had in the past, he would certainly have put it to bed over the course of 10,000 years. Unlike many of his brothers, Vulkan isn't someone asleep or lost in stasis. He has been very much alive. He and Guilliman have been through too much since those days. Heck, for all we know, Vulkan could use it as a bargaining chip to get Guilliman to leave the Salamanders alone in implementing the Codex Astartes. Leave my legion as a single chapter, or I'll tell our brothers your secret. Okay, that would certainly put a dent in the relationship, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Vulkan can be ruthless when he needs to be. But that aside, of all the brothers who could see the Imperium Secundus revelation as a shock, and react very negatively, I don't think Vulkan would be one. Because Lion L. Johnson aside, he's the only Primarch who most likely already knows about it. Of course, this could all change when we hit the end of the heresy and move into the Scouring. And now moving on to Vulkan's relationship with the Chaos Primarchs. Now in particular here, I'm thinking of Magnus the Red. As we've discussed this week, the two had a clear fondness for each other. However, we have seen that has now ended. With the climax of Magnus's fall within the throne room itself, with Vulkan literally breaking Magnus's body beneath his hammer, that has absolutely ended any well-meant feelings from Magnus. In that moment, Magnus the Red truly died. He became a minion of Tzeentch, no more than a slave to the ruinous powers. If there's one thing we know about Magnus, it's that this guy absolutely holds a grudge. He's had a 10,000-year war going against the Space Wolves since Prospero. As when Guilliman returned to the Imperium alive, should Vulkan return to the Imperium at large, Magnus would undoubtedly know it. And considering their last meeting, I think he would absolutely want a rematch. As Magnus has sought revenge against the Space Wolves, I believe it's a certainty he would seek the same against Vulkan. Now you could argue, why hasn't he against the Salamanders so far? Well, from an outside the lore perspective, the fight against Vulkan is pretty new information. This wasn't something that has existed within the background for long at all. Previously, before the novel Old Earth, Vulkan wasn't even on Terra during the siege, so this is all very new territory. And in the lore, a reasoning could be made that Magnus would see Vulkan in particular as the Grudge. This wasn't a legion invasion such as the Wolves at Prospero. This was very much specifically brother against brother. Vulkan was the man alone who stopped Magnus from killing their father. That's going to leave a very deep scar. The more I thought about it over the past few days, the more I think a Vulkan return would well see the new empire Magnus is building as a new war zone. The Sons of Vulkan going up against the Sons of Magnus. A rematch of Primarchs. One where Vulkan would see the sorrow, and one where Magnus would see only vengeance. I'm really beginning to think that this is a definite rivalry to come, should the other loyalist Primarchs ever return in force. Considering Vulkan's legendary strength and his healing ability as a perpetual, There's an argument to be made he's probably the best loyalist Primarch to go up against a demon brother. He may not be the most skillful, but he's definitely bringing the strength and durability. So for me, a Vulkan return to find Guilliman once more leading the Imperium would go fairly smoothly. Vulkan wouldn't be a Primarch who would be shocked and appalled by an Imperium Secundus revelation, and so may actually be a big aid to Guilliman in getting through any potential storms that could arise. I feel he would have an undoubted desire to cross the rift, to aid the lost half of the Imperium, but that duel against Magnus the Red could surely come back to haunt him. The scars of the past are not so easily forgotten, with Magnus surely seeking revenge. But as always everyone, what do you think? What do you think would transpire if Vulkan returned to the Imperium? With the new information we received over the past few years, of Vulkan being the one to deny Magnus his victory, do you feel that would undoubtedly be brought back in the future? That Magnus is not one to let a grudge lie? How do you feel that Guilliman would factor into this equation? Could the two loyal Primarchs combined be a good counter to Magnus? Could they be the driving force that sends the planet of sorcerers back into the Eye of Terror? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. With that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.